Hello everyone and welcome back to the Winning Agenda. My name is Jesse Muleman Marshall and it's been a while since we've done a deck tech video. So I thought it might be a good opportunity during Skirmish season to do a deck tech on a deck that I really love playing in Blitz. Blitz is not my favorite format, but one of the great things about it is it lets me play Kano. For those of you who watched the Kano Drakai of Aether Hero Spotlight that I did on Kano, I'm sure you could tell as I was going through that video that I really enjoy the mechanics of this hero. I think it's got a lot going for it. It plays Flesh and Blood in a really different way. And Blitz is really the format where Kano shines. So what I'm going to take you through today is a Kano build, which if you've seen the results from the first couple of weeks of Blitz, you will have seen that there are a lot of decks doing very well that play a lot of blues. And that is obviously unfortunate for Kano. One of the things that you have to contend with in Blitz as the Kano player is that every one of your opponents is going to have access to high Arcane Barrier because of the way that Blitz equipment sideboarding works. Basically, if your opponent wants to have Arcane Barrier 4, they're going to be able to have Arcane Barrier 4, although they won't be able to have any of their other equipment that might be sort of utility equipment to help their deck go. So if your opponent is playing Arcane Barrier 4, you need to be able to play around that and win against that, and it does get a lot harder if those decks are also full of blues, so they can make use of their Arcane Barrier multiple times in a turn. But what we're going to talk about here is a pretty, I think, well-balanced Kano deck that gives you lots of different options, has a lot of reds for that reason, because you want to be able to try and get through those high Arcane Barrier numbers, and also has some opportunities on the right-hand side, as we'll talk about here, to try and set up those bigger turns a little bit more consistently and be able to hit the maximum number of cards in one turn and play the maximum number of cards in one turn to be able to try and get over the top of those big Arcane Barrier decks at instant speed, hopefully when they only have one or two cards in hand. Or ideally zero. So I think what I'll start with is how I've organized this deck visually here. So what we've got on the right hand side are the either card advantage cards or opt cards that are either going to get you more cards in hand, more mana or resources in the form of energy potion, or the ability to opt in the form of Gaze the Ages or Clarity Potion. Then down the bottom here, we've got our resources. So we've got, I'd probably put these zaps here, hey? So we've got the two zaps, the Scalding Rains, the two Reverberates, and the two Emeritus Scolding blue, all of which give us a few more resources in addition to these other blues that we've got over here to be able to Kano and cast the things that we want to cast. Up the top in the middle here, we've got two Aether Wildfire, two Blazing Aether, two Aether Flare, two Emeritus Scolding Red, and two Forked Lightning. And those cards, which I'll discuss in a bit more detail in a moment, are the main damage dealers in the deck. So they're the ways that we're going to try and kill our opponent and get over the top of their Arcane Barrier and reduce their life total. On the left-hand side here are our utility cards, if you like. You could probably put Nourishing Emptiness over in the card advantage column because it gives you the potential to get +1 intellect. And Nourishing Emptiness is even more powerful in Blitz than in Classic Constructed, like a lot of these cards. So Kano in general is more powerful in Blitz than Classic Constructed because the raw number differential in terms of life total on Kano is smaller. Yes, you start with a quarter less life, but it's only 5 difference rather than 10. And all your cards are doing the same amount of damage, so that gap is a lot easier to make up. Nourishing Emptiness, similarly, you can only play one in your deck, but in Blitz, you've got a 40 card deck rather than a 60 card deck, and so you're more likely to hit it in any given game, and it's arguably more impactful as well. And I think that one of the other reasons that Kano is more impactful in general in Blitz is that you've got a deck that can put out large amounts of damage in one turn using things like Nourishing Emptiness, using one-use only things like Talismanic Lens to look at the top card of your deck, and Storm Striders, the legendary foot equipment, which we'll come to in a minute, which allows you to play a card at instant speed. So having all these things that are sort of one-shot only, one-use only, in your deck, but having your opponent start on a lower life total means you need to do a lot less of that chip damage to get them down into that lethal range. And that's one of the really exciting things about this Kano deck. So with these kind of combo cards on the left here, they either give you the ability to play other cards as instants rather than actions, so they don't take up an action point, or they themselves have that ability. So the Snapback Chain Lightning combo on the left here, it's sort of a classic example of that. It's a bit of a a value combo that you can use in the early turns if you're not in a position to try and kill your opponent straight away and you just want to try and chip a bit of damage in. You can use Chain Lightning, which says you may play your next wizard non-attack action this card as though it were an instant. If you have played another wizard non-attack action card this turn, deal 3 arcane damage to each opposing hero. And something which is a little bit counterintuitive is that if you play Chain Lightning first, you can then play Snapback, because Snapback says if you have played another wizard non-attack action card this turn, you may play Snapback as though it were an instant, and it deals 3 arcane damage. They both cost 1. So you can pitch a blue or even a yellow, play Chain Lightning, and while Chain Lightning is on the stack, you can play Snapback, because Snapback now recognizes that you've played the Chain Lightning, so you can play the Snapback as though it was an instant. Snapback then resolves first and deals 3 damage, and then Chain Lightning resolves, and it says if you have played another wizard non-attack action, deal 3 arcane damage to each opposing hero. So that part only triggers when the Chain Lightning resolves. Whereas the Snapback, if you have played another wizard non-attack, you may play it as though it was an instant. Obviously that text needs to be active before you play the card to enable you to play it. Whereas the Chain Lightnings, if you have played another wizard non-attack, is something that happens on resolution. So that's just one of those sort of cheeky little combos that you can use to gain basically an extra action point, and for 2 resources, you're dealing 6 arcane damage, which is pretty good as far as the conversion rate goes from physical damage compared to arcane damage. Then when you throw in things like Sonic Boom, which if you have set up your deck correctly, allows you to basically get a free hit and a discount. So you get an extra action point and a discount on the next thing. So Sonic Boom costs 2, and it says deal 3 arcane damage to target opposing hero. If Sonic Boom deals damage, look at the top card of your deck. If it's a wizard non-attack action card, you may banish it. If you do, you may play it this turn as though it were an instant, and it costs X resource points less to play, where X is the damage dealt by Sonic Boom. So if Sonic Boom deals... naturally it deals 3 damage. So if you can, say, pump it with your Crucible of Aetherweave, so it gets up to a 4, or if you've played, say, a Cindering Foresight beforehand, which also gives +1 and gives you an opt and can be played as an instant. You can set up these situations where you know you've got a Sonic Boom on top of your deck, so you can go, for instance, Cindering Foresight from Arsenal, for example, on your opponent's turn, and Cindering Foresight's played as an instant on your opponent's turn. It's then buffing your next wizard non-attack that deals arcane damage by 1. Then you pay 1 for Crucible of Aetherweave to give your next wizard non-attack action +1 as well when it deals arcane damage. Then you come in with Sonic Boom for 5. So now, even if they've got Arcane Barrier 4, they can pay 4 into the Sonic Boom, but then you get to flip over the top card of your deck and play it with a 1 resource point discount because Sonic Boom has dealt 1 damage. If you then have, for example, an Aether Flare on top of your deck, you can play the Aether Flare then for free because Sonic Boom gives you a 1 resource point discount, and this is going to deal a further 3 arcane damage without consuming an action point because Sonic Boom lets you play it as an instant. So it deals another 3, and then Aether Flare says the next card you play this turn with an effect that deals arcane damage deals that much plus X, where X is the damage dealt by Aether Flare. So you can see here you're already presenting 5 damage from the Sonic Boom in that situation. Then off the top, you're getting to play this Aether Flare, so it doesn't even have to be in your hand, for free. You're also getting a resource point discount, and you're threatening another 3. So in total, you've threatened 8, which is your opponent then needs to have sort of 3 cards in hand to be able to cover all of that up, and you've only spent 1 action point to do it. So that's an example of how Sonic Boom can be a really powerful card at extending your turn. Even you can do all of that at instant speed, potentially, if you hit the Sonic Boom off the top, off a Kano. So stacking your deck and knowing what's on top of your deck, using these opt cards like Clarity Potion and even the Talismanic Lens on big turns can let you set up a massive amount of damage off the top with very few action points if you can chain together these key cards. So Cindering Foresight, lets you play it as though it was an instant, that. Even if there was a Chain Lightning on top, and that. That then lets you, for instance, play your next thing as an instant, which then you could play your Sonic Boom as an instant. Then if you know what's after the Chain Lightning was the Aether Flare or the Aether Wildfire, which, similar to Aether Flare, pumps all the rest of your spells for the rest of the turn by the amount of damage that Aether Wildfire deals, then for 1 action point, all of a sudden you're chaining together 3, 4, 5 spells. And then if you've got a Blazing Aether there afterwards, then you can that's sort of your finisher, because that deals damage equal to the amount of damage you've already dealt in the turn. So the task with this deck is to put together, and I guess I'll read Aether Wildfire because it's quite important to the high-end power of the deck. So it costs 2 and it deals 4 arcane damage to target opposing hero. If it's played during an opponent's turn, until end of turn, action card effects that deal arcane damage instead deal that much plus X, where X is the damage dealt by Aether Wildfire. So it has to be on your opponent's turn, so you've got to either be, Kanoing or doing something to give you the ability to play this on your opponent's turn, but then everything you do thereafter on that turn is getting buffed by the amount of damage that this dealt, which clearly opens up those kind of exponential damage turns that can really kill your opponent quite quickly, to be frank. So Aether Wildfire's a buff, Aether Flare's a buff, you've got the buff from Crucible of Aetherweave, you got the buff from Cindering Foresight, and you got the buff from Stir the Aetherwinds, which is another card that costs 2. You may play your next wizard non-attack action as though it was an instant, and if it has an effect that deals arcane damage, instead it deals that much plus 3. So if you can chain together any of those buffs and then hit a Forked Lightning, which has 2 instances of deal 2 arcane damage to target hero, then all of a sudden both of those instances will get buffed, and you can, instead of dealing 4, if you buff this card by 1, then it does 6. If you buff it by 2, then it does 8. If you buff it by 3, then it does 10. And if you buff it by 4, then it does 12. So you can see that it gets out of hand pretty quickly. The classic combo is, of course, just combining Stir the Aetherwinds for 2 mana. Lets you then play your Forked Lightning as though it was an instant. So you can even do this on your turn. You play Stir the Aetherwinds from Arsenal, for example. Then you play Forked Lightning for a total of 5 resources. And you can even then, if you've got 2 blues, add in a Crucible of Aetherweave activation. So between the Crucible and the Stir, you're then buffing your Forked Lightning by 4. So each of those instances of damage gets buffed by 4, so they both become 6, and then that's 12 damage that you're threatening. So that's kind of at the most minimal cost with no real information needed off the top of your deck, just a simple 2-card combo. You're threatening 12 arcane damage with 1 action point. If you can then follow that up with knowing what's on top of your deck, either by opting with Clarity Potion, opting with Cindering Foresight, or opting with Talismanic Lens, you can potentially be following that up with a whole lot more damage, either from a Blazing Aether or something else. Or you can be doing other things before it, like Aether Wildfire. But understanding those key combos like Stir and Forked, or like Chain Lightning and Snapback, or Sonic Boom and X good spell on top of your deck, you can start to see how you can craft really good turns using Stir the Aetherwinds, using Aether Wildfire as a buff, or using Cindering Foresight as a way to opt off the top of your deck. And then you've got Lesson in Lava as well, which is can be a really important part of these turns. It does get quite expensive quite quickly to be using Lesson in Lava. But what it says is, cost 1, deal 3 arcane damage to target opposing hero. If it deals damage, you may search your deck for a wizard card with resource cost equal to or less than the damage dealt by Lesson in Lava. Reveal it, then shuffle your deck and put it on top of your deck. So it's a tutor that lets you put something on top, which is the perfect place to be, because then you can use Kano's ability to go and fetch it off the top and play it, assuming that you have the resources to be able to do it. So Lesson in Lava can be another way to fix your turns. If you've got a couple of pieces of a really big combo, but you don't have the last one. For instance, if you've got a Aether Wildfire and a Stir the Aetherwinds and enough blues and perhaps an Energy Potion in play to be able to do those together, and then you want to follow that up with a Lesson in Lava off your Storm Striders into a Kano for Blazing Aether to try and kill them, then you can try and put all that together. I mean, that's a lot of resources to do that. What's that? 3, 5, and 2 Kanos. So 3, 5, 8, 11, which is going to be a lot. Plus you need to have access to 2 of the cards. Or if it could be, I'm not doing all the maths right now, but basically, if you want to have a big turn like that, you need to be calculating very regularly on your opponent's turn whether you want to block, and whether they're going to be presenting lethal to you first, because, in Blitz, you're starting on such a low life total. You've really only got maybe 1 or 2 turns of tanking their damage. Sometimes they're presenting lethal on turn 1. But likely you've got 1 or 2 turns to be able to block with 0 or block with one card from hand and still survive. But you've got to be quickly calculating whether the cards that you have in play are going to allow you to present lethal back. on the clapback on their turn at instant speed, or on your turn if you want to do it that way. But if you're doing it on their turn to take advantage of Aether Wildfire and things like Cindering Foresight, then you need even more resources, and you need a bit more knowledge about the top of your deck. So one of the play patterns that I'll often see myself getting into with this deck is trying to hopefully hit energy potions and clarity potions early, get them on the board to try and set up that big turn. Sometimes if your opponent runs themselves out of cards, you can try and go for the Aether Wildfire kill really quickly. But regularly against a good player, particularly a deck that's playing a lot of blues, so something like Kassaya, Dorinthia, or Oldhim, or even Viserai, they will keep one of their blues back on their turn, so that even once they've done everything they want to do before they pass, they'll keep a blue, and then they'll arsenal it if you don't do anything. And you basically have to be able to calculate when they're attacking you, how many of your resources you want to present to block, and then how many you want to have available to try and attack them at the end of their turn, or on your turn basically. So in the early turns, I'll often be blocking quite a lot, but you do need to be quite cautious of the fact that the more you block with this turn early, the more you lose your key pieces. So if you're blocking early on turn 1 and 2 with Aether Wildfires and Blazing Aethers, then all of a sudden they're not in your deck anymore, and you've got a far more difficult job of trying to kill them. You know, you've still got your Stirred and your Forked and your Sonic Booms and your Chain Lightning Snapback combos, but you haven't got your kind of 2 power pieces. So you might want to block with some other things instead. But then if you block with your Reverberate and your blue Scalding Rain, all of a sudden you've got no blues to be able to do stuff on your turn. So you can get pinched a little bit early, and that's where having things like a Tome of the Aetherwind is a great 1-card hand, because you can play this for 0 resources on your turn if it's your last card left in hand, and then you draw 2 cards, and that will usually allow you to make a play. It'll either allow you to do something like just Kano and see what you find, play a potion, Kano, and then play whatever you hit off Kano, because everything costs 3 or less resources. So if you hit 2 blues, then you're guaranteed to be able to Kano and then play whatever you hit. Or you might be able to just, chug out a zap, or at least get an arsenal out of the turn, like a relevant arsenal, something you want to be doing on their turn. So Tome of Aetherwind, I should say, is a good 1-card hand. Ideally, on those off turns where you've blocked with 3 cards and kept a tome, you'll tome, hit a potion, just play out the potion, and then arsenal the second card. That's a great turn if you can pull that off, particularly if you've been able to mostly block out whatever they're throwing at you. So don't be afraid to block early. Don't feel the pressure to try and kill them on turn 0 or turn 1. But be aware of the fact that the more you block with your key damage dealing cards, particularly these cards up here, the harder time you're going to have actually killing them. So try and make sure that then whatever you're pitching, even if you're pitching sometimes 2 cards early to Kano, which may not be ideal, if you feel like the game's going to go a bit longer against something like Oldhim, setting up Sonic Booms into Aether Wildfires, into Blazing Aethers and Aether Flares and those sort of combos on the bottom of your deck can be really helpful to getting you to a victory later on. So yeah, don't be afraid to block, but do be really aware of keeping those key cards in your deck and stacking the bottom of your deck with some good combos if you think the game's going to go long. If you don't think the game's going to go long, it can still be important to keep some things in your deck that you might want to tutor up with a Lesson in Lava. But in general, managing life total is the really big challenge for Kano, given that you do start lower. So manage life total, be aware of your different combos and the ways that these different lines of play can lead you to a kill. Take advantage of the turns when you've got the resources you need combined with some of your power cards to try and really put on big plays that put on a bit of pressure. And play around these potions a bit as well in the early game. Really prioritize getting them out because they will open up much bigger turns for you. Having an energy potion on the board just opens up that extra bit of damage on a key turn. Like at a minimum, it's sort of 2 activations of a Metacarpus node on your key turn when you're trying to kill them. Metacarpus node, which basically kills itself and destroys itself the turn that you use it, but you can use it any number of times on that turn for 1 resource to buff different spells by +1 damage. So yeah, at a minimum on your key combo turn, popping an energy potion is 2 Metacarpus node activations, which can actually be quite a lot of damage if the first Metacarpus node activation is going to an Aether Wildfire, the second one's going to an Aether Flare, and the third one's going to a Blazing Aether. you know, the 1 damage off the Aether Wildfire becomes another 1 on the Aether Flare, which becomes another 2 on the Blazing Aether. So you're getting quite a lot of damage out of that. So that is kind of an intro to the deck. There's endless permutations and different combinations and different things we can discuss, but I think I've covered off on the main role that a lot of these cards are going to play. Emeritus Scolding, I guess I should mention quickly as well. I haven't mentioned that. That's just a really good rate of damage on their turn compared to other spells. So Red Voltic Bolt, which was the base 2-cost wizard spell, dealt 5 damage. Emeritus Scolding deals 4 if it's your turn, but it deals 6 if it's their turn. And since we're mostly going to be trying to deal damage on their turn, Emeritus Scolding for me gets the nod, although there are obviously times when you want to be, you know, keeping 2 cards in hand and chipping in some damage, in which case having the Red Voltic Bolt can be good as well. But I think having the ceiling of 6 on the Emeritus Scolding can be a lot more important against these high Arcane Barrier decks. So that's the key summary of the Kano deck. Hope you've enjoyed. If you've got any feedback in the comments or any things that you have different in your Kano deck or things that you'd like to discuss, I'd love to hear it. There are a couple of cards I guess I wanted to quickly mention that you might want to consider subbing in, and that I've considered subbing in. Obviously, Blitz is a format with no sideboard of cards, but Fate Foreseen can be really helpful against those pesky warrior decks. Just having a defense reaction can help you survive a bit longer. Blue Voltic Bolt is obviously an alternative to Blue Reverberate. It's kind of a personal preference thing, or even Blue Scalding Rain, but yeah, that's just an option, as well as Blue Emeritus Scolding. These blues are kind of somewhat interchangeable with whatever you want. Blue Potion of Deja Vu is obviously an interesting one in terms of trying to set up those big turns. I think the 4 potions that I've got here is kind of the most that I'm happy to play, I think. But maybe 1 or even 2 Potion of Deja Vus might sneak in there. And then you've got Aether Spindle, which is another powerful 2-cost wizard attack. It's a 2 for 4, but it gives you the opt if you hit, equal to the amount of damage that you deal. It's one that is right on the borderline for me. I prefer having the flexibility of Snapback on those big turns, and that's probably the slot that this sits in. Maybe you could replace the Cindering Foresights if you want, but again, I like having the opt from the Cindering Foresights to set up those big turns. But Aether Spindle's right there on the edge as well. So that's the Kano builds that I've been toying around with at the moment here in Skirmish season, what are we, 3 or 4 in March, April 2022. And I will be back very soon with some more chats about the upcoming ban list announcement, and hopefully a little bit more deck tech and other content. Thanks for tuning in. I've been Jesse Muirman Marshall for The Winning Agenda. Cheers.